Hey guys, Paul here, Sugar's Garage. I know it's been a bit, everyone's been dealing with COVID. Had to stay home with the kids, they didn't have daycare, so getting videos out was kind of put on the back burner. From the last video you saw, I had showed you this. So it's a shell. I ended up getting a complete 9-quart floor pan for it. And then I just grabbed all my Fastback metal and threw it on there. And I'd say I'm about 90% happy with how it all turned out. So we'll go over all that. Other things I've been doing this entire time, we built a gym down in the basement, so that's all done. Just need to get equipment for it. I want to talk about the last car you saw, the green one. So when we moved from our old house into here, I thought I had set the jig up to handle the move. And when I originally built it, I didn't realize or think we were going to be moving anytime soon. So I didn't really build it to move. It was 2-inch square tubing that was 1/8 of an inch thick. Long story short, we moved it to one location, took it off the trailer, then picked it up and moved it back here. Something shifted, and I could not find a good point to start to ensure that all the frame points and the metal was where it should have been. So not a big deal. Didn't really care because I was thinking about getting a one-piece floor pan anyway. So I have a buddy that likes dealing with old Mustangs. He turns some into convertibles, or he builds race cars out of them and stuff like that. So he was very happy to take it, and so I gave him that and ended up buying the 9-quart one-piece floor pan for the car. So as I said, it's went together about 90% how I wanted it to. So super happy with it, and we'll get into taking the metal off the car so I can show you where I started, and it is sitting on the jig, and we'll talk more about that too. So let's do a walk around the car before we take the metal off, and then I'll take the metal off the car, and we'll start with just the pan. All right, so before we take the metal off the car, I figured we'd take a quick walk around it, see how it is. So the whole thing's clamped. It's on the jig. I'll talk more about how I ended up redoing a little bit of the jig too, just to be a little more precise. And you can see it's all clamped together down inside here. And then ended up, you look way up in there, see that big hole? That's how I got that bolt in. I was in a rush when I did it, and I figured I'd just patch it up. Not really worried about it, but there's definitely better ways to do that. You see a nice gap there, just, ran out of clamps. So, let's see here, kind of see this panel. It's somewhat centered. I think I need to spend a little more time with it, so I don't want to give too much of a review on it without actually doing something with it, but not too bad. Got around here, quarter panel. You got it clamped there. It comes around, nice frame rail. Got it clamped, and when we take it apart, you'll see the inner structures as well. Clamped there, going across, just nice metal. Oh, real quick, yep, there's the dash from the 67, kept that. I'll clean it up, definitely needs a new color. Got your floor supports. This one here seems a little bent in. I won't be using them anyway, so not too big of a deal. So that one's pretty straight. Not a big deal. Get that MTF long subframe. It's gonna be good. Yeah, let me come down the other side. So I did end up getting the the A-pillars right where they needed to be. And you look under here, you can see where it's clamped. I ended up cutting a little bit of metal off the side structures to get that to fit in there correctly. And now it's nice and flush on both sides. And they're screwed down in up top. And yeah, I'll show you how I ended up doing that with that guy there. And yeah, so, all right. I think we need to start taking metal off this thing. All right, so that was fun. If you guys ever wonder what a fastback kit looks like, there you go. All the Dynacorn metal you can have. Yep. All right. Enough of that. Let's take a look at this. So there's your one-piece floor pan. Things it comes with. So this is actually for the package tray. It's a piece, but I'm just gonna keep this here. Keep an eye on it. Better shoot it down here. All right, there we go. All right. Anyway, so let's have a look here. There's the spare tire tie down you get. On the side here. It's all pretty decent metal. You get for your door hinges, and then for mounting the fender, you get one for each side. And if you go with the non-convertible, which I'll be honest with you, because I was going to add I am going to add the convertible inner rockers. Kind of wish I ordered that pan. So, but anyway, I didn't. So I could do a bunch of extra work. Anyway, when I got it, I actually ordered two of these. I ordered one, it came, and it was a little bit out of whack. I took my tram gauge and tried to make sure that the rear frame rails were square to each other, and they weren't. I mean, they were off by ½ inch. Did a ton of measuring, could not get it to be any better than that. Called the supplier, he reached out to Dynacorn, and they said, no, that's not right. So they sent me another one. And measured this one, and it was within a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch. And I figured, you know what, I can work with that. So kept this one. Some immediate things I noticed about it is that the pan, this side here was sitting lower, so there's a small twist in the pan, which was easily rectified when I put it on the jig itself. The other thing I noticed is you can see this floor, or the floor support here, is kind of twisted at this end in this way compared to the other one, which seems pretty straight. Not a big deal. Those are coming off because I'm going to be using the MTF one-piece subframe assembly. So other than that, I don't really have a whole lot to say about it. So let's get into the jig itself. So when I took the old car off the jig, I ended up removing all the vertical posts. and made sure that the lines were the exact distance that I wanted them from the center, where, for instance, this bolt is, the center of this bolt going through here measures down to this line is exactly what I want. And I did that on all of them, and not to my surprisement, because of how I did it before, some of them were off. So I like 10 times checked everything after I did this, and they were exactly where they're supposed to be. And then I got the jig underneath the pan, got the post mounted, laser leveled it, and that's when I realized that I did have a pretty decent twist on this side, and then also running a level, which we can do right now. Unless something changed between when I last did this and now, this guy should be pretty level. Yeah, you can just see it. Yep, really good. Nice and level. Nice and level. So I did that. Got it right where it needed to be. So that's the pan. And I redid the jig to be a little more accurate. And everything is right where it needs to be. Okay. The tram gauge I used to measure the distance between those A-pillars on this hole here. And it took the measurement off the old car and kept that tram gauge right where it was. And I got a measurement backed up for it just in case, so I can get that back where it was. And as I told you earlier, I did screw the brace for it, this guy here. It got drilled in these two spots here. All right, let's talk about the Fastback metal. You can use this for a conversion if you want, not a big deal. I did forever fight the metal. It just didn't seem right, and what it was is there's a slight twist in this coming out, and when I tighten that down, everything comes together and lays perfectly. And it took a while for me to figure that out. I was like measuring down to a laser level. Why is this side higher than the other? It doesn't make sense. And just a ton of measuring, and figured out that that's what that was. So not a big deal. The other thing is I do have the glass from the 67 Mustang, the front windshield. So once I get this back together, I will place that in there and see how it looks. If everything's looking good, then I've confirmed that that's correct. Amongst a ton of other measuring I'm gonna have to do. So that's the kit. And I think now, oh, one thing I forgot to tell you guys is when I did get this, I took a bunch of video of me measuring it when it was flipped up on its side. I have misplaced those videos. I'll see if I can't find them and get them included in this. That would be next to talk about it. If I can't find them, then we'll just talk about it later. All right, let's get to putting metal back on the car. I would say you want to make sure that when they ship it, that this area here doesn't get jacked up with the forklift from lifting underneath, because when Dynacorn ships these, that's literally down underneath here, there's nothing underneath of it. So when they lift it with a forklift from the side, it could damage it. There's supposed to be forklift skids right there, but I mean, I could have swore I saw a little bit of forklift damage earlier on it, but it looks pretty good. Yeah, it's a nice piece of metal. Covered in the weld-through primer. Yep. Oh yeah, right here. A little bit of damage right here, but I'll be able to dolly that out, no problem. Not bothering me one bit. Everything looks good. Back looks good. Yep. And then here's your seat risers. They don't come welded on, which is nice because I'm going to be putting in the convertible inner rockers and one-piece seat riser crossover pan to help strengthen this thing up. And then you get your brackets that mount to the rear. So come over here to the old car. They would mount right in here. So it comes with the 65, 66, I believe, and the 67, 68. So cool. All right. Next thing I'm going to do is start measuring and making sure that this thing is built to spec. All right, got the pan up on its side. So what I'm doing here is making sure that the mounting points of the torque boxes are plumb to each other. It's very, very important that these guys line up together. Not so much in the rear because I'm doing a 4-link in the back. I'm not gonna be using the rear at all. So yeah, as I said, very, very important that the mounting points for the front leaf spring mounts on the torque boxes are plumb to each other. So what I'm doing here is I got a plumb bob strung. It's kind of hard to see now, but I'll get in closer. And then what I did is I leveled the pan, and then I ran the plumb bob to see where the pointer was in relation to the hole at the bottom. Okay, so let's get into how I did this. So as you can see, it's up on its side. I've got washers going underneath here to help get the pan level, and then I got washers going on underneath here to help get it level as well. There's a lot of back and forth with this one. So to start, got the pan on side obviously, and then I got my level. I put it between the two mounting points, here and here, and got it level. It's moving right now because the whole pan's moving, but it's level. All right. Then I took my digital level here, it's not on right now, but this is a good edge to use. Can't really use these edges because this whole rail twists as it's coming through here, and it's hard to find a good spot. This is also a good spot to use as well, so I used both. This is still indicating a degree, so I'm wondering if you know, it's just a quality control issue with Dynacorn, but once I got that to 1, this edge was 0 degrees, and so is this edge. And then I used this edge here, and I used this edge here, and everything matched. Everything got to 0. And then I ran my plumb bob. I had to fine tune a little bit, you know, get it up in here. You got to get it centered in this hole here, and then here, so it's nice and centered, and then ran it down. And then, since things are kind of hard to see, I kicked on this light here on my inspection mirror. I got underneath, up here, and you can see that pointer in there, it's kind of moving around. That's the plumb bob, and it's smack dab in the center of that hole. So that tells me that these two mounting points are square to each other. A couple tools you want to use, you need blocks and whatnot to help lift it up. As you can see, I left the packaging, the plywood on the side of it to kind of help maneuver this thing around. And then yourself a little pry bar here. All right, so with that done, very, very happy about that. Let's get into checking these points out. See if they're square to each other. Cool, let's do it. All right, so I did some tramming. First things first, I wanted to make sure that Dynacorn's pretty consistent. So I made a graphical template of the distance between these holes and where they're located on the rail. So what I did is I put a piece of paper over it and then took a pencil and went back and forth making the hole, then I cut the hole out. So that fits over those holes perfectly, and then what I did is I came down here and I flipped it over and flipped it over this way, and I put it, it's gonna be hard to do this with one hand. Come on, baby. Like that, and got everything lined up where it's supposed to be. And as you can see, it's a match. And I did a bunch of measuring and whatnot, and I did the same thing in the back here. Those holes are equal in relation to the rail, so that worked out. All right, so then I took a tram gauge, and I got, as you can see, I just marked the center there, the diagonal down to this hole here, and I'll put the tram gauge on it. Again, really hard to do with one hand. All right, so that's in the hole down there, and then as you can see, right there is the center. Well, if I do the same thing down at the bottom one here, I'm off. I'll try to do this again with one hand. Then the hole there. Try to zoom in. You can see, let's try to see, here it goes.
I'm off. All right, cool. So no big deal. Zoom out here. So you can see those two dots, one in the center and one to the right of it. Well, I measured that and got about 3/32 of an inch. So that's a little over the allowable 1/16 of an inch difference. And if you remember what I said, this guy here was just about 1/8 of an inch off. So I think I'm happy with that. Again, repo metal, you know, you can only do so much with it. I don't think the suspension would suffer that much. So the next thing to do here is get it on the jig. Let's get to it. All right, got all the wood off. So there's a mount in the rear shackle mount. There's a couple bolts going through there. Might be able to see it. I'm sure you saw it earlier, but there you go, right there. One on each side, that's loose fitting. And then it's mounted up here with a couple straps that will zip out, and this thing will be free. And I gotta figure out how I'm gonna lift this thing out by myself. Let's do it. All right, so that was a ton of fun getting this thing back on the jig and turned around. So forward facing now, which is good. A couple hairy moments there, and yeah, probably should have had steel toe boots on the whole time, but pretty cautious, but I guess it's still accidents can happen. But anyway, enough of that. Okay, up in the air, looks good. You know, I added a modification to the jig prior to deciding that the car had shifted in transit, and this is something I added on prior to taking the jig off the car here at my new location. But help locate it and hold it all together was actually very useful, and I'm glad that cross member just went right on, no problem. So let's see what else. Those scissor jacks that I like to use, you guys have seen them a ton of times, that come in handy. One thing I made sure I did is I set the bottom of this to 21 inches on both sides, so it's not sitting on a twist, because the next thing I'm going to do is mount the post to it and laser level it, and then weld it back onto the jig, so that's all said and done. So yeah, looks pretty good. Gonna be a fun project. Yep. Nice piece of metal, huh? Cool. All right, so next thing is getting it welded onto the jig. All right, so the car is where it's going to be. I got the jig leveled and on their pads. I ended up having to cut this guy off because the bolt got jammed in place, so I replaced it with an old one, and then I raised these up so the bolts weren't sticking out as far. This part of the jig is bent up. Keep in mind, it doesn't matter. The jig can be all which way and whatever, it doesn't matter. What matters is when I laser level the points on the car, that they're level within each other. That means if there's any twist in the actual pan itself, let's say twist like that, then that'll correct that, because you can actually move this up and down very slightly where the rest of the car doesn't move. So there could be some twist, but this is how we'll verify that. It is very, very heavy. This is where the center of gravity would be located, through here. That's where it wants to rotate. You could really easy pick this thing up and have the back drop out. So the back end is heavy. Most of the weight is balanced literally right at the torque boxes in the back here. Okay, so next thing is gotta hang the feet and then laser level it. But to start off, I'm gonna re-show you guys what I did originally to get my marks on my post, and how I corrected a little bit of misalignment. I mean, maybe it was a 32nd of an inch off, but I did it by using one of these. So, all right, let's get to it. Okay guys, so to get started, what I did was I made sure on my drill press that my deck was at a 90-degree perpendicular to the actual drill bit itself. And then I did a pilot hole all the way through, and then I stepped up the drill bit sizes till I got to a 1/2 inch. All right, so then what I did is I took one of these. So it's got a little centering point on it. And this is a 1/2 inch in diameter. What I did is, and I'll try to show you guys here in the camera, is I ran it in through here, like that. And then I put an O-ring, rubber O-ring on the inside to hold it, and then I set it on the edge of my workbench here so it was hanging off, and then it held it in place. Then I took my tape measure, and it's supposed to be 7.98 inches from the baseline per the Ford service manual. I have my little draft site printed out here, so it's the same thing, it's just a little bit easier to read. And so I did 7 inches to this line here. And what I did is I put the one line on here from the tape measure and lined it up perfectly, and then went to 8, right? Because I was on 1, so yeah, went to 8, and then that's 7 total. And then I took my sliding caliper here and put the 0.98 inches, and then essentially I just put it on the line here, and then where it was at 0.98 inches, I locked it, and then I just scribed a line, and then I used my scribe to finish it out. And then I took my 90-degree angle, a square, and I rounded around this edge and then marked my mark. So you could see where the old one is. Let's get something to point out here. The old one was actually right here. The new one is here. So not a huge difference, but I like being exact. So now it's more exact. I did that for 4 of the posts because the front 4 are no longer on because I don't have a front clip. So I got the 2 backs done, and I actually redid those because if you remember, I cut those in half. So those are good to go now, and then the torque buck ones are good to go now. I know this thing's all chewed up, but it'll hold. I'm not worried about it. And so yeah, so now the next thing to do is get these hung on the car, and then we're gonna laser level the car. Hey guys, so right before I hang these posts, I want to show you something. This is inherent in my jig because I chose to use 2-inch square tubing to hold up the back of the rear frame rail. So that didn't leave me a whole lot of space in here to get a bolt in to go through, right? So what I did is I drilled a hole with a hole saw on the side here, and then I will be able to get my bolt in there. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and fabricate a piece of metal to go back in there and patch that up, and then I'll clean it up, and it'll be like it never happened. So not a big deal. So yeah, that's what I'm gonna do in order to get these bolts in. Oh, and then as you can see, I inserted some polyurethane bushings in there to help with centering the mount there. So all right, let's get to hanging these posts, and then we'll start laser leveling. Okay, as you can see, I got my laser level cast on the line, and looking underneath here, you can just see it right there. Now, the line I'm aiming for is right about here. You can just see it. So, it's up high, obviously. So, what I'm gonna do is lower this down, get these, both sides right on it, and we'll go from there. Okay, so now I got these posts where I want them. So I always start with the torque boxes here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tack weld these posts in place, and then I can take these off down here, and then that'll allow the pan to pivot here. I'll loosen up the front little jig thing I have here to allow the pan to move down if it needs to. I may have to readjust this accordingly, and then I will, back here, there's the line right there. So these are either slightly bent down and they need to come up some, or the actual pan itself needs to pivot down a little bit more. So if you guys remember this little tool I made, right here's a line, and it's 5.736 inches, and it's meant to measure right here, right where the transmission cross member meets. And it might be hard to see, but the line is right where the tip of my finger is. It's about, the laser line is about roughly 1/4 inch below where it's supposed to be. So the front of the pan needs to come down. So, all right, I'm gonna spot weld these into place, tack weld, and then do both sides, and then we'll adjust the back. Okay, so we ran into a minor issue. So I jacked up the back of this off camera. So if you look here, you can see the line right here, and then there's the laser level. When both sides are the same distance away, when I jack them up and get them right on the line, I come up to the front here, or at least the torque box. And this whole section's sitting high, about 1/8 of an inch. But if I stand on the pan, I can get it to come down, and the line goes back onto the mark. So there's a slight bow in it. Not sure what caused that, or if that's just how these things come, but I'm going to see what I can do to get some weight under there and help hold this thing down. I'm 200 pounds, so I actually had to kind of jounce in a little bit to get to actually go down. So it's going to need a little over 200 pounds of weight to get this thing to sit where it needs to. So another option would be to put anchors in the floor and then ratchet strap it into place and have it hold it there. But I'm not going to drill into my concrete. So, all right, I'll figure it out. Let's get to it. All right, so I got it where I wanted it to be. First things first, I got the laser level lined up with post here and the post on the other side, and then that one there and that one there. Everything's perfectly level there. The back is super square, it's level. Both sides are equal distance off the ground and the laser level. Moving up to the front, this guy here, this inner rocker, is level, the length of the car. This guy was about 3/8 of an inch lower than that one. It was kind of coming down, so I picked it up and with the scissor jack there, and then put my little foot under here to help keep it in place. And now the car is level side to side up front and between the rockers. It's also the same distance underneath the frame rails at the torque boxes down on both sides to the laser level. So that's good. The only other note is that I could not get the height here down without either buying 250 pounds of weight to put on my jig or drilling in the concrete to bring it down, which I'm not going to do. So looking at it, it looks like I can just build the car, and then when it's all said and done, I can actually move this up, and all it's going to do is bring this part up. That's it, because these aren't going to bend up, right? So I'm not worried about that. Other than that, super happy with it. It's not perfect, but it's definitely workable. So, all right, that's going to be it for this part. And let's move on to getting that guy on the car. All right, so this is the first pieces that are going to go on to the actual side structures. Come with the wheelhouse installed. Some of you guys might be putting huge tires in this thing, so you can cut the inner portion of that out now or later. Recommend doing it later because it kind of helps line everything up. Anyway, so when you set these in, you're going to have your inner rockers here. So you're setting the outer rocker onto the inner rocker. Now, you've got these bump outs that were stamped in. Well, when you set the outer rocker on that, it goes into the groove here, lays here, and that kind of locks it in place. So when you pinch the top and then you pinch the bottom together, they sit on these. At least that's what I've noticed. Lining it up has been pretty simple, and I've done both of them, getting them clamped back here. I did have to do a little bit of metal massaging on both sides here to get this to round a little bit more to go with the wheelhouse. Not a big deal. Just a hammer and dolly, that's all it took. So yeah, so anyway, where those tabs are sticking out, the little bumps, let me get down here since they sit, get a better shot. Try to do this one hand. So right, that ridge, the top and the bottom of the inside of the outer rocker sits on those. And you can kind of see where it's been marked up from me playing around with it. So yeah, kind of helps guide where it needs to be. Still need to confirm that it's in the right spot. Just getting it where you want it. So let's go put it on the car. Okay, So kind of just piecing this together one at a time. So where these clamps are is right where those humps were, and you can see that the metal is pretty decently flush. And keep in mind, I still need to massage this around a little bit to get it where it needs to be. Let's see what we can see underneath here. Yeah, so you see that the bump sticking out? So when this guy goes up against it, it lines up pretty good where it needs to be. So, I mean, obviously that's all gonna get welded. There's a big gap there. It just needs to be, earlier that was sealed up. It just needs to be massaged, right? So when you do this, I suggest you go like Harbor Freight and just buy a ton of clamps, because you'll need them. So, yep, so that's that piece. We'll get this massaged around a little bit more, and then I'll throw the next one on, and then we'll follow up with the next piece. Alright, so that's what it looks like with just the side structures on. You gotta bear with me because I'm not setting this exactly where it's gonna be right now. I just want to do the video for you guys, but you can see the gap difference here. It's over here, so that definitely needs to come down a little bit, which it can. It's just clamped pretty hard in place right now, so it's sitting a little high over here. Just play around with it, get it where it needs to be. Big open gap. Cool. All right, so the next piece I'm gonna do is the cross brace for the front of the car. We'll grab that. This guy literally is set in here like that. You can see how it works, right? You kind of slide into each other like that. So they're spread apart pretty far right now. Excuse me, they're spread apart pretty far right now, the two pieces, so you can see it's not fitting right. So I need my other hand to do this. So I get the camera set up so you guys can see how I attach it and see how far the pieces move together. All right, so hopefully you guys saw when I tightened this down that this because this flange coming off here, I was kind of sitting up like that. When I tightened it down, it all came down together and got that nice and straight. All right, so how did I get the distance between the A-pillars where they should be according to the old car? And I was using this tram gauge. So what I did is from the outermost portion of this elongated hole on both sides, I put the tram gauge in there on the actual car, and then brought it over here. And it took a lot of straps and maybe a little bit of help from my wife to get things held in place so I get everything centered correctly. But as you can see, it fits perfectly on the outer edge of those holes like it did on the other one. And that's how I got the distance. And when I did that, I dropped this piece where it needed to be, and look, there's that center line. So obviously I had a laser level going to the car. So it took multiple hands. I used ratchet straps to help, tying it off the workbench or the welding machine, or the table, and the toolbox there, just get things where it needed to be. And then I found the center of everything. There's a center there. There's a center line there, and then there's another one right in the center back there, and then I can cast a laser vertical line to get the vertical line square to the car, or at least the floor pan, which is all being built off of. And then I centered this guy on it, and then marked it
and got these drilled in, and that's how I was able to get that all squared up. And I'm gonna verify it against 68 before I do any welding, and then drop in that windshield that's down in my basement in here. And if it fits right, well, I think I'm pretty damn close at that point. So what does that mean? That just this section, when it's centered to the laser line, so I can guarantee you it's not right now because this whole thing moves left and right, but when it is, this is good to go. That does not mean you're good to go here or you're good to go back there. That means this is good to go. All this metal can be finagled, twisted just a little bit, and that way you can get it right where it needs to be. All right, if you guys got questions on that, please ask, and I'll go over it again in another video. All right, let's do the package tray next. If I remember correctly, that thing's kind of a pain. All right guys, did this one off camera. Couldn't get the shot, and it's kind of a pain to put in. You gotta use both hands, all that jazz that have been in the way the whole time. Anyway, it's in there, it's loose. Ended up having to unclamp both the side structures to get enough space to spread apart to get it in there. I just checked the weld and sealant manual, and this is correct. So it sits on top of this. It'll get plug welded here, and then it's kind of spread apart right now, but this guy sits on top of, better shot, this guy. So this guy sits on top of that guy, kind of like that there, right? And gets welded down. And then kind of sits in there. Now it's not exactly where it needs to be. So my plan for this guy to kind of is obviously get everything on the car. Once the car looks 100% right, clamped together, then I will start marking and or drilling the self-tapping screws to help realign everything up. I also will put my trunk lid on with the hinges and just make sure that everything's sitting correctly. And that should help me line everything up. And if everything's even, square, and looks correct, there's no reason why it shouldn't work. So that's that guy. Okay, enough of that. So from here, we should be putting these guys on. All right, so it's all not too bad to put on. You know, obviously, you know, that edge comes on the outside of the inner structure. Could use a little more work with it, a little bit of a gap there. But man, I'll tell you what, that's not a bad gap right there. Again, not exactly where it needs to be, so this might close up on one end or stay the same, we'll see. But not too bad. You can see how it sits up here. Yep, it's clamped. And then you've got these bump outs here. It'll get welded to there. So this will close up against that. So down here, how are we looking? So as you can see, this kind of all fits together down here, right? So that guy touches there, helps kind of line everything up. The same thing will happen over here once we put that piece on. And then we'll lay the cross piece across it once we get the other quarter panel on. Get the tail panel in, and we should be pretty close, to being done. All right, so this guy, you know, it's just gonna be laid on there. Has a channel in it for the rear windshield. And this goes across like that. Sits in here, you see. But you can see how it's got a gap, and I can press down. Well, that movement going down is the actual inner structure frame, if I can get it to look right, bending a little bit. So you kind of got to finagle this around a little bit to get it where it needs to be. So, yeah, it comes with a bend. So, and you can see I'm like barely touching here. So that's probably because it's not exactly where all the metal needs to be, but I'm touching here. So got to do some measuring to see if this was just cut long, or that was cut short, or this metal needs to be pushed back a little bit, which it definitely does a little bit. You can see right here it does. So it's not exactly where it needs to be. So
But yeah, that gets put there. And then we'll drop the roof on it and we should be good with that. So that'll be next. All right, so yep, just laid on there like before. Definitely needs to be played with a bit. And then I have the rain channels as well. They'll go underneath this before I put the roof on. You can see it's kind of how it fits together when it's all snug. This side's a little bit better than the other side right now. See how this all comes together here. Go under there, see how it connects. And then if we go to the other side, should be somewhat similar. Pretty close, a little off here. Remember from the earlier video, that was all pretty tight. So it'll go together, I just gotta play with it some more. So, yeah, cool. All right, well, while I have you here, let's grab the trunk trim piece. This guy here. Just lays in here like this. And then it's all pressed together, welded together. It's a little bit tighter than that, but you can see it's for the trim pieces around the rear window. So it gets laid in there. And then now, get the tail panel on. It just goes right in, and most of it lines up. Some of the holes are kind of off. Not a big deal, but again, I got to center that to the car with the laser level. Cool. So what's left is drop it in that cowling over there, which is pretty straightforward. Most of you have probably done that type of work on these cars because they're notorious for rusting out. I was going to throw in the dash, but I think I'll just do that later. It just sets right in there. And it's a pretty simple thing to do. It's got little tabs on the side of it, I'll show you. So these tabs sit against the toe kicks here. These guys sits on in here. You just get it where it needs to be and weld it, and then as you know, part of it goes across here, also attaches to the upper cowling. Upper and lower cowling, and that kind of all comes in one piece. So when it's all said and done and welded. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Please ask questions, please subscribe. And I think the next video we're gonna be getting to is I wanna show you guys that 68, and then I will probably disassemble most of this again and start getting pieces exactly where they need to be, marked, screwed, held together, and we'll go through that. So. Cool, thanks for joining me guys. Glad to be back.